Hello, welcome to the pod. It's Bryan and Ryan, and we now have a final four. Ryan Peterson, Brian Houston. First of all, Ryan, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing good, good. I just heard a stat that I did not realize, but for the first time in history, no team in the final four east of the Mississippi River.
Oh, yeah. I had heard that last night. That was assuming that UCLA would hold on and win. Pretty crazy to think.
That's insane. Because I
Yeah.
guess that means you got to eliminate all of the Carolina schools, all of the Big East schools. So yeah, it makes sense, but it just something I hadn't really thought about. So we've got another thing that's pretty incredible is that two of the teams in the Final Four are from the state of Texas.
Yeah.
And we are a basketball state.
And and one of them, probably not one that many people would have thought. If you follow college basketball, I don't think it's a huge surprise. But if you're, kind of a passive fan and just kind of watch the tournament, U of H making it. I never got to see or experience their glory days with Phi Slamma Jamma,
Oh,
and this is obviously a completely different style of play. But Kelvin Sampson has done a great job, and pretty cool to see them back in the Final Four.
pretty incredible story with Kelvin Sampson, a guy that's man, he's had his issues with the NCAA over the years. Got Oklahoma on probation. He got Indiana on probation. I mean, he looked like he was going to be, toxic waste. And then he gets a chance to go to Houston, resurrects his career, and now, here on the tail end of it, he is, taking a team to the Final Four. Um, and it's the first time again since the '84. I did experience Phi Slamma Jamma.
Yeah.
Um, I said this on Twitter the other night. That Phi Slamma Jamma team, for those like yourself who are too young to have experienced it, maybe the greatest center in the history of basketball. Akeem Olajuwon,
Right.
Clyde Drexler on the Dream Team, Michael Young, who was an All American. You had Benny Anders. You had just the incredible talent. It was just NBA talent, and they played like an NBA team. I mean, up and down the floor. If you want to see a great game, one of the greatest games ever, go back and look. I believe it was the '83 Final Four semifinal game between Houston and Louisville. Go back and watch the broadcast of that. You'll find it on YouTube. It is a circus. It is an absolute track meet. The thing that I posted on Twitter the other night is if that team had had a coach as good as Kelvin Sampson, they
They
probably
would
would
have
have
won.
won three titles. Guy V. Lewis, God bless him, God rest his soul. He did some amazing things. He had a Hall of Fame career, but he was one of these coaches that could do less with more than anybody in the sport. To have that kind of talent on a ball club and not be able to win it at least once. In the North Carolina State game, the miracle, with Jim Valvano was the one that people point to because he played right into their hands.
Yeah.
NC State controlled the pace. They kept them from running and took them completely out of their game, and they didn't know what to do with themselves. Georgetown, different story. Georgetown was every bit as good as Houston, and they had Patrick Ewing, and they played tremendous defense. The early year, the freshman year when they made the Final Four, they had to play North Carolina, and Akeem Olajuwon was a freshman, and it was just there's just a perfect storm of things that happened that they weren't able to win it. But Kelvin Sampson's a heck of a coach. And the thing that's really been impressive about both of these Texas teams is that both of these programs are noted for being really good offensive teams, but these two teams this year are lockdown defensive teams. In addition to that,
Well, and so I see Houston a lot because they're in the same conference as my school, Wichita State. And they're all about two things: offensive rebounding and defense. They take a lot of bad shots, but they get so many of the rebounds back that that's a part of their offense. That's just who they are. And you have to be prepared for a rock fight because they're going to bully you. And you saw in the previous round, who did they beat in the previous round? Was it Oregon State? Or I'm trying
yeah,
to remember.
yeah,
They weren't ready for it. And then even in the Elite Eight, I don't think, or no, I'm sorry, they beat Syracuse.
Right.
They
And
beat
that was just,
Syracuse.
and beat them
Yeah.
soundly.
Yeah, and I think everybody, because Syracuse was, the big school, and they thought that their zone would give problems, and it was the opposite. They weren't ready for Houston. So, and the funny thing about Houston is they're undersized, but they're all guys that are about 6'7", 6'8", but they rebound like crazy. So I think it's funny because the Final Four, it has two very interesting matchups. You have the All Texas Showdown with Houston and Baylor. Baylor has been in the top two all season with Gonzaga. Had a little couple hiccups after they came back from COVID late in the year, but they figured it out. And then Houston. And then on the other side, you have the new West Coast and national darling against the school. I mean, the Cinderella is UCLA, who has more championships than anybody, going from the first four now to the Final Four. And, their last two games were both crazy. They get heartbroken with the buzzer beater in the Sweet 16, and then still found a way to win in overtime, which was amazing. And then last night, I mean, that was just, I didn't think anyone was going to get to 50 there for in the
It was
last
looking
several
pretty doubtful. It was
minutes.
looking pretty doubtful. Yeah,
But
go ahead.
go ahead. No,
No,
you go ahead.
it's your turn.
The one thing I will say about Gonzaga, watching them play, I feel like they're just a cut above. I know we always have recency bias, but I can't recall, and again, I watch a lot of college basketball. I can't recall someone, I think, had mentioned the 18 Nova team, and I honestly don't remember well enough, but I don't remember a team getting so many easy shots. Like, they're passing, at least this year, there is no one that can touch them. I mean, USC was supposed to be the best defensive team they had played all year. They have huge size and length, and Gonzaga was just toying with them. I mean, passing so quick, and their cuts were so crisp. And that's the thing about Gonzaga. They're not a team that just relies on making a bunch of threes. And that's why I think they're so good, because threes you can go hot and cold. They don't rely on threes. They just rely on good defense, scoring in transition, and their passing ability in the half court is so impressive. They're so fun to watch. And UCLA's been a nice story. I don't see any way they can beat the Zags.
I would be stunned. The one thing that Gonzaga has going against it is history.
Yeah.
It's been since 1976 that a team has gone 30-0. A team has gone undefeated going into the Final Four and was able to go on and win the championship. And that was back when Indiana and Bobby Knight, had a team for the ages. It was a fantastic basketball team that I remember and loved watching. So, and the pressure of winning 6 ball games, but they haven't had any pressure. They've won every game by double digits the entire tournament.
I was trying, the streak is nuts. It was like over 20 straight games or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's just unbelievable. I think it's 25 that have been double digits, which part of that speaks to the strength of schedule. Although they did play some good teams in
non-conference. They played a really tough non-conference.
They did.
Yeah.
But the part of that streak, I think, does speak to the level of the competition when they got in the conference play. But that's taking nothing away from them. I mean, it's the only thing you always say with Gonzaga is they've done this. We've seen it. They've had good teams. They've had a team that's gone to the Final Four, and then for whatever reason, they just couldn't get over that next hump. And so that's the one thing. If you're a fan of any of these other schools, you say, well, until they do it, you're going to have to show me. I do believe with you, the eyeball test says they're the best team. I wonder what happens if somebody like Timmy, the kid from Richardson, gets in foul trouble.
Which, by the way, he has some sort of weird celebration after every basket. I'm sure when you're playing him, you just want to throw the ball at his head. Like, I mean, it has to get so old. But I mean, he's good, so he can keep doing it. It's like, stop him. But it's just like every time he scores, he's doing something with his stash, or he's flexing or doing something.
He picked up a dime last night after making a great pass. It's like, it's
Oh, that's
incredible.
what he was doing. I was trying to figure out what he was doing.
Yeah, it's just, they are, as you said, they're like the Globetrotters. They are just fun to watch. Suggs is a terrific guard. Kispert is an All-American. I mean, they do have 3 legitimate lottery picks on their team.
Yeah, and I was seeing last night a lot of basketball guys were saying Suggs is going to be the #1 pick. His passing was so ridiculous. I mean, it was fun. It was really fun to watch. I do think the only team out of the other 3 in the Final Four, I think, that has a chance would be Baylor. I do think Baylor has a shot because Baylor's really good. I just don't. It's just, so many teams play good defense when you get to this point, and I don't think good defense matters to Gonzaga because they already play good defense themselves, and their offense just runs. So, Brian, they're shooting over 50-55% every game. It doesn't matter. And, some teams have a hard time doing that a couple times a season. They're doing it every game. So if Gonzaga is playing their game, I just don't see anybody beating them. But I think the game, if you've been watching college basketball from start to finish, the game we all thought was going to happen was Baylor and the Zags. And it's a good chance that'll happen.
I was looking at some stuff about Baylor because they've won 4 straight now in the NCAA tournament. No game closer than 9 points. So they've had a run almost as impressive as Gonzaga's. And yet they haven't put a complete game together yet. I mean, they shot 40% in the second half against Arkansas, and they still win every game by 9 points. They are, again, immensely talented. Maceo Teague is a lockdown defender. I'm really interested to see what happened, who they put him on, and then what he does as far as defense against them. He's a terrific player, and he scored 22 points. He's hit a couple of clutch 3-pointers in the semifinal game. I think Baylor's bigger, and they are as talented as Gonzaga. I do like the fact that, I mean, again, Baylor traditionally used to be really good offensively, a little shaky defensively. That's not the case this year. So I think if it does get to that, and then we do get to a final, it's going to be a really intriguing matchup. I'm still picking Gonzaga to win it all, as you are. But it would not surprise me if Scott Drew and Baylor actually come through and win this thing. 71 years since this team has been in a Final Four, and you think about when Scott Drew took over that program, it was a dumpster fire of toxic proportions.
Yeah, toxic is an understatement.
Following the murder of a player, Dave Bliss's cover up. I mean, this program was as close to the death penalty, and Scott Drew took over. Why he even took the job is still amazing to me, but they convinced him to take it. And he took over a team full of walk-ons, and people had been transferring out of the program, and has built this thing up. And it's hard to believe he's been there for 20 something years now. It seems like it's really hard to believe he's been there that long. I talked to Danny Casper, my friend, who was a longtime college basketball coach, built the program at SFA to where it is now. And he said that Drew has evolved so much as a coach over the years because SFA played Baylor back when Drew first came on board. And he said all they did was zone. And he says, and now they are as tough a man-to-man defense as you want to get into. And they can do a lot of different things defensively now. So he's really come a long way as a coach. The other thing that's surprising, Ryan, is when you look at this this NCAA tournament, and you see the trash that your bracket looks like all the way through this thing. But when it's all said and done, you got 2 number ones. The top 2 number ones are in the tournament, a number 2. And then, of course, as always, you got one team that you're scratching your head wondering how the heck did they get there? That seems to be the case every year. When it's all said and done and everything, and the dust settles, it usually is almost chalk.
And the one thing though about this tournament and it's why I know you have doubts. I want football to expand. With football, you never could have right now in the Final Four, only half of the field are Power 5 schools. 2 aren't. And that would not happen in major college football because they would have never had the shot. So I think it's been a great tournament. Look, UCLA, no one picked them to make it. And Houston, yes, they were a 2 seed. I picked Houston to make the Final Four because I had watched them all year. I guarantee you most people did not have Houston in the Final Four, even though they were a 2 seed, because in fact, they were probably the least, you know, power of all the number 2 seeds. They probably were looked upon as the weakest. So yeah, you got your two big boys that we thought were going to be there, but what Gonzaga has done is just insane. I think about 20 years ago, they were the feel-good story, and now they're the bully, and UCLA is going to be the Cinderella trying to keep going. The one craziest stat in this whole tournament to me, Houston is the first team to ever reach the Final Four without having to beat one single-digit seed in their path. All 4 teams they beat were double-digit seeds. That region was just a mess. But hey, you played the teams in front of you, and they had knocked the teams they beat, you know, teams ranked higher. But pretty crazy to have a path like that. And now they're gonna have to beat 2 number 1 seeds more than likely if they're gonna win the whole thing.
It's incredible. The only thing I'm going to mention is shifting gears from the men's tournament to the women's tournament. The foul at the end of the UConn game against Baylor was criminal.
Yeah.
And those officials should be banned for life, because this poor Carrington girl got hit in the face. She got hit on the arm with 5 seconds left in the ball game. And if there was any reason to point to corruption in college basketball, to let UConn advance by letting that foul be a non-call is just, I'm telling you, these guys ought to go to prison. It was so bad.
Yeah, and heartbreaking for Baylor. That would have been really cool to see the men and women both go to the Final Four.
And they had a team that was a Final Four worthy basketball team. That was the other thing, is they got, because they had the COVID shutdown, they kind of got screwed on the seeding as well.
Yeah,
because they were number 1 seed.
That should have been a national championship game, probably.
I think so. And UConn may still have won the game. Okay, that's taking nothing away. UConn is UConn. Okay.
Yeah, they've been UConn for years.
But to have the game end that way, it was just, I mean, if that would have happened in a men's game, I mean, this place would have burned down.
Twitter would have burned to the ground.
Oh, listen, Mark Emmert would have been strung up if that had been allowed to go unpunished. But you know, most people didn't even see the Baylor women's game because they were watching the men's game, which is unfortunate the way things have worked out. But anyway, that's the only comment I'm going to make there, because other than that, I really don't care. It's Shaka Smart. I don't know if we talked about this, because I don't know if it had happened at the time that we talked last week. Shaka Smart, the tournament's over. He gets knocked out by Abilene Christian. As soon as they're done, he takes a job at Marquette. He's out. He's leaving Austin. I just want to get your thoughts on that. The thinking is, of course, Chris Beard from Tech would be the likely candidate to take the job. Why you would want that job, I have no idea, but your thoughts on it.
Wasn't surprised about Shaka. Look, I mean, you know, he had been at UT for 6 years, I think, and never won one NCAA tournament game. And then you look at what he did at VCU. I mean, he went to the Final Four. So I think he was just getting out before he was going to get fired. The pressure,
a bunch of money.
Yeah, and I think he's better suited, honestly. I think he'll do well at Marquette. And I wouldn't be surprised if he goes to Marquette and actually wins NCAA tournament games. You know, there's one thing. That's the thing. You know, being a good basketball coach is one thing, but being able to rather inspire a bunch of 2 and 3 stars or a bunch of 4 and 5 stars is a completely different thing. 4 and 5 star guys have been the big dog, have been the star. Many of them aren't going to work as hard as the 2 and 3 star that's trying to prove that they belong. And I think that the way that Shaka coaches and his teams play, I think it might be better suited for like he did at VCU at Marquette. So I think he'll actually do better there. It'll be interesting to see. At first it was like, well, Beard was definitely going to take the job, and now that's kind of cooled down. And I don't know what's going on, if they're waiting until the end of the tournament or how that search is going. But
I know they interviewed Royal Ivy, who was a former player there at Texas.
right, which was a little surprised. I mean, I hadn't heard I remember Royal Ivy, but I hadn't heard his name in a long time. That one kind of surprised me. And Shaka made a comment that I do think. And I don't know how much he meant by it, but he said he was glad to be back at a basketball crazy school. And look, UT is not a basketball school. They've been a good program in terms of they're usually always in the NCAA tournament, but I've been to a UT basketball game. It's about as exciting as going to, I don't know. I'm trying to compare it to a high school soccer game. Like it is not exciting. The crowd's not into it. There's a bunch of empty seats. People don't care. And the only time they start taking notice is when the tournament starts and then they lose. And
Well,
then
they're front runner fans. I mean, they'll jump on a bandwagon as fast as anybody. They'll also jump off a bandwagon as fast as anybody. And the other thing, though, it again speaks to the arrogance of the Texas boosters, is that John Calipari's name was mentioned as a possible candidate. Yeah, sure. And Nick Saban's coming to coach your football team. You're right. Okay, enjoy that thought. So anyway, I'd be very surprised. Chris Beard's got a better job where he is at Tech. I mean, he's like the fourth highest paid coach in the country in Lubbock. Okay.
Well, the thing I still think, look, Texas is getting what they deserve because Rick Barnes was a heck of a coach, and he won a ton at Texas. He went to a Final Four. I saw his teams with TJ Ford play in the Final Four. He won a lot of games, and he wasn't good enough. And they haven't won an NCAA tournament game since he left. Meanwhile, he's made Tennessee just like he had at Texas. They're usually always in. They got upset this year, but they're always in the tournament. So you run off a really, really good coach. This is what happens. So if they don't find a guy, that's what they get for being basically dumb and arrogant in terms of what they think they are. But they had a great coach. They had a top 15, top 20 coach to begin with, and they ran him out of town.
It's just going to be really interesting to see if Beard, he's a Texas ex, he was a Texas assistant, but he's got his kids are up close to him in Lubbock. He's engaged to a volleyball coach up there now. I mean, he's been associated with Tech for 15 years because he was an assistant under Bob Knight. And then he's been there and he's built up this program that is considered one of the best in the country now. And I think he's proven it can be sustainable. So
right.
It's just, I just don't, it's going to be really interesting to see if he is not swayed by the temptation to go down there and be with the Orange Bloods,
the only thing I mean, maybe they throw so much money at him that he can't say no, but you look at,
he's making 5.5 now,
but in a down year,
yeah,
they still were a 6 seed. They still made it out of the first round. I mean, you're not going to make a deep run every year. And a bad year was still better at Texas Tech is still better than what Texas has been doing. So the culture he's made, he just seems like a Tech guy. He seems like a Lubbock guy. Like, I think the fit's good. I think it would be a mistake for him to leave, but they may persuade him otherwise.
And Tech, and I'm sure if he gets hired, there's going to be somebody saying he's not flashy enough. That's usually how it always works. There's at least half of the boosters there with the big money are all saying, well, he's not John Wooden from the grave. That's what we were expecting. So, that's typical of that. NFL goes to 17 game regular season. What do you think?
I hate it.
Why? That's more football.
Okay. As a football fan, yeah, it sounds great. Brian, here's the thing. Usually by the time you get to the 15th and 16th game of the season anyways, teams are playing with so many guys you've never heard of that teams are struggling just to field, a starting 11 on both sides of the football. A lot of times that last game, teams are resting that have clinched are resting starters because they're beat up. The NFL is so violent. And I mean, we saw so many injuries this past year. To me, you say, oh, it's just one game. But to me, there's already, and look, as a fan, I love having games, but I already feel like there's too many games to begin with. I mean, I've only known a 16 game schedule, but what year did they go from 14 to
It was the late
16?
70s. It was 78, I think, when they moved, because I remember the 14 game schedule.
Okay. And that seems crazy adding 2 games, but I don't, and the only thing I will say that, because one of the major problems I had with it was in the NFL, at least when there's fans in the stadium, home field can be a big deal. There are certain teams that have huge home field advantages. However, now you're going to have half the teams with 9 home games and half the teams with 8. But the way that they're doing it, which I do think this is smart since they are doing it, is one conference will be home for that interconference game one year, and then the next year they'll switch. So this year, every AFC team will have an extra home game, and every NFC team will have an extra road game, and then it would switch the next year. That way, it's not, the competitive balance with it for the playoffs and the conference isn't, it still has, it's still fair, at least somewhat fair. But the opponent, it's another game now that because they're doing it by how you placed the year before. So if you're a first place team, you're getting another first place team on your schedule now. If you took last, you're getting another last place team on the schedule. So I just, and I see a lot of people going at players who have complained, saying, you're a bunch of crybabies, you make all this money. I mean, that's good and all, that's great and all, but it's a very violent game, and it's another game now when we're already week 16. So many of these games are completely pointless, and now we're going to add another week and another game. I mean, some of the teams this past year, Brian, had 50%, 40 to 50% of their salary cap on IR. I mean, you're playing a bunch of guys that aren't even really NFL players. So I just don't, always about more money. It's always going to be about more money. And I know the players will get more money out of this, I guess, but I just don't really. I think the NFL had it perfect the way it was, 16 games, how the schedule shifted every year and had a formula. And now we're going to have this random. And then the other thing is, you're going to have these games, and you would think, oh, this is a great opportunity if you're going to do it to have some great rivalries again. No, we're just going to have, a bunch of random interconference games that have no meaning whatsoever.
Here's what I think is going to be the problem. It's like, for instance, Dallas will play at New England on that 17th game. Okay. What happens if both teams have already got the playoffs clinched? You know what's going to happen. It's going to be an exhibition game. They're going to
So are these games going to be the last game of the season?
My understanding is they are going to be the last game of the season.
Okay, so they're not. Okay, so that makes it even more ridiculous. I didn't even know that. I didn't even know that was a part of it. That makes it even worse.
Well, right now it's going to be an AFC versus NFC. The AFC is going to get all the home games this year, and then the NFC next year. And I think all those games are going to be on week 17. So it takes away the drama of those big divisional matchups that usually were the last game of the season, Cowboys, Eagles, or Cowboys, Giants, or something like that, to decide the division. Those games are going to be played earlier. A lot of playoff teams, if they're in the playoffs, I guarantee you're going to see players sitting in that last game, which happened with 16 games. My big gripe about all this is the hypocrisy of it. They completely are always crying about player safety, and they legislate hitting completely out of the ball game in the secondary, and have really hurt the game because of that. And yet they add a game. The only thing that I find favorable about this at all is it cuts the preseason down to 3 games. Those games are a joke. They make the fans pay full price for those games. And then you're lucky if you see a starter in the game. And if you do, they're going to play one series and then they're out. And it's criminal what the NFL does.
And then you're watching a game of a bunch of guys, most of which aren't even going to be on the final roster.
Right. Yeah. One last thing, and then we'll go. The Dolphins making the trade. They trade out of the 3rd spot. They give up that pick. They move down. And then they trade with the Eagles to move back up to get 6. They've got 1,000 picks, and San Francisco's sitting there at number 3, and it's looking like they're going to be 3 quarterbacks going 1, 2, 3. Your thoughts on the whole deal?
I was a little shocked when the trade that it was San Francisco that had moved up. And two things from this. Number one, it showed, I think, Miami, at least it appears that they're at least right now all in on Tua, because I think there was some doubt would they actually explore taking another quarterback. Um, and then San Francisco is not now all in on Jimmy G. I do think that they're being smart. Look, 2 of the last 3 years, the Niners, despite all the talent they have, their seasons have been nightmares because a lot of it stems from Jimmy G, their starting quarterback, getting hurt. They win when he plays, but he misses so many games, it hasn't mattered. And I think their feeling was, when are we going to be able to get this high up in the first round again? We like the group of quarterbacks. So that's the thing. If there's a guy you like or a couple guys that you like and you know one's going to be there, then to me, you do whatever you have to do to get it. So I don't think there's a price too high because quarterback is the most important thing. And I think they're actually being smart. Look, they can keep Jimmy G and see what happens if you take a Trey Lance that needs time probably. But then he's there in another year. But I think it was a smart move because I think, again, if you have a guy that you love, go get him. I do think it's interesting though, because the guy that we weren't thinking this high, but now, and I don't know if it's all smoke screen, but is the Bama quarterback, Mac Jones. Now he could possibly, I mean, a lot of rumors are that that's who Kyle Shanahan likes. And to think he could go at 3 is pretty crazy, but is Justin Fields going to slip? He had a great pro day, but I'm not a pro day guy. I'm like, they're throwing against air. Who cares?
Dwayne
But
Haskins
yeah,
had a
it'll be
great pro
interesting
day.
because the guy that it's funny seems to be slipping is Fields. And Lance and Jones are the ones that kind of moving up. So, and if Fields does fall, does someone else come up? And what is Atlanta going to do at 4? Are they going to take a quarterback? Are they going to wait for a king's ransom to trade out of 4? Teams like Carolina and Denver, New England, they all need quarterbacks. Is someone going to, ante up to move up? So this is going to be a fun draft because, I mean, who knows? You could have 5 quarterbacks actually go in the first several picks if teams trade up.
And man, this league has changed. I mean, these guys are not patient with their quarterbacks, and they are, I mean, they are willing to move on immediately if they think the
Yeah.
guy's not, even if they've given up a number 1 pick for the player. It's just like the Jets, ready to move on from their guy and go get somebody else. It's just incredible the lack of patience for it. And oh, by the way, this just in as we get ready to say goodbye. I think the lawsuit count up against Deshaun Watson is now at about 93. So I'm just going to leave it at that. And any final words before we go?
I will say so the Deshaun Watson real quick. I had been leaning towards siding with him just because of his history and how he's always been a good guy. Read the SI article if you have not.
Okay.
Read the SI article about it. They had a source, a woman that is not in the lawsuit. She's hidden her identity to protect her business. It is very damning to Deshaun Watson, and I don't know how he's going to get out of this thing, Brian. We may not see Deshaun Watson on a football field for a long time. So it's getting worse by the day. But this SI article to me was the worst thing I read, and really changed my perspective on, okay, he has done some things that he should not have done. So we'll see. It's the whole situation is sad, and but yeah, I'd recommend, if you haven't read it, read the SI article.
And the thing that I'll leave as we go away is that, uh, as I said before, anything is possible. Nothing would surprise me anymore. And you think you know a player, but all you know is what they show you.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I've been fooled before, and it looks like we're going to get fooled again here. And I agree with you. It's a sad situation all the way around for everybody involved. And Deshaun Watson's career, I mean, this guy goes from being, a top 3 quarterback to who knows what his future is going to be now. Just, over, if it's true, over
And
stupidity.
the thing I've talked with a couple of friends about, you don't know what's going to happen because, again, it's not a criminal. These aren't criminal cases, at least right now. So what will the league do?
Well,
Um,
the league can still throw the hammer down on him,
right.
you know.
But will they? will they be more lenient because they're civil cases? And again, civil cases, it's not beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
Like if there's any doubt, he can lose. And with all these piling up, I think we're up to 20. And there, who knows how many more might get added. I think 20 is the number that Busby, the lawyer, had said they were going to have. But I mean, yeah, it's going to be hard to win 20 civil cases. I mean, that's crazy to even think about.
It is crazy. The whole thing's insane. So, well, Ryan, great to talk to you this week. Have a great week. We will be talking again next week probably after the championship game,
Yes.
because we want to get through and see who wins the national championship, and then we can start talking to Major League Baseball season and move on to as the year progresses and things are opening back up a little bit. We finally are starting to get a little bit of normalcy back. So, good to visit with you as always.
All right, buddy. Thanks.
All right, that's Ryan Peterson. I'm Bryan Houston. You can check out the pod on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, leave comments, share with your friends. Thanks to the 5 viewers that always watch. We appreciate it. And we will talk to you next time.